As we head into the final week of the campaign, voters are starting to form their views about who to support and vote for on May 13. They're making their list and checking it twice. Hi, I'm Doy Santos, and you're on The Cusp. Well, questions have been asked during this campaign. Asked of the opposition, asked by the opposition about the overall framing of the election and of the policies that should matter to voters. How would the opposition position itself against the administration? Would they pose as obstructionists or as constructive alternatives to the ruling coalition? The success of either strategy depends on the popularity of the incumbent. Recall in the case of Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo and the genuine opposition in the midterms of 2007. Her unpopularity as a result of the Hello Garci scandal meant that the opposition could present itself as robust fiscalizers. This resulted in the opposition garnering a majority of the Senate. In the case of Pinoy and UNA led by Vice President Jojo Binay during the 2013 midterm elections, the opposition took a cooperative stance to a then popular administration and allowed them to share in the electoral spoils, garnering 3 out of the 12 seats available. But in the case of Ocho Derecho in 2019, it has sought to define itself as the party of the resistance, as the only thing that stands in the way of President Duterte, who has, according to most recent polls, reached the height of his popularity among voters. So as a result, the opposition's candidates are languishing at the polls, with only 1 or 2 at best having a shot of landing in the Magic 12. And there's a distinct possibility that neither one will get in. So the next question then becomes, would a scandal in the middle of the campaign involving the administration cause voters to change their minds? That was the question posed by the Bikoy videos. It was obviously meant to be one of the set pieces of this campaign, a real gotcha moment, similar to Hello Garci. But it seems to have backfired, or at least become a bit muddled. 2 people have come forward with different stories about the videos. Rodel Jaime, a website developer, whom the authorities arrested after seizing incriminating evidence during a lawful search at his home. And Peter Advincula, who came forward after Jaime threatened to reveal all that he knew, and who has apparently been involved in a few scams in the past. Events are quite fluid, but at the time of recording this podcast, it was revealed by Senator Tito Soto that Advincula had made the same allegation before. But back then, it was against the then President, Benigno Aquino, and his Justice Secretary, Laila de Lima. He made these allegations while in prison for grand estafa and illegal recruitment. So the credibility of Advincula is really in question here. Now, even if the opposition denies any involvement in the Bikoy videos, the arrest of Jaime, an apparent Liberal Party supporter who's been photographed with Vice President several times, is not a good look for them, since it is they who would directly benefit from this scandal. And tagging Duterte's underage daughter as a drug merchant was probably an overreach, as it simply beggars belief that such a young lass could get so entangled in a complex criminal web, such as the one being alleged. And it shows a complete lack of delicadeza. Hardened loyalists on either side, of course, won't change their minds. But the swing voters in the middle, they might change their minds. The set piece of the Bikoy videos was meant to cast some doubt in the Duterte administration and cause some of these swing voters in the middle to reconsider whether they should vote for the administration's ticket and insert a few of the Ocho Derecho candidates in there, or maybe even switch sides and vote straight Ocho Derecho. Perhaps that was the idea behind it. But I guess the timetables got a little bit messed up with the arrest of Jaime. So, as events are fluid, we'll have to wait and see what unfolds. There could be further revelations in the days ahead as the DOJ and NBI continue with their investigation, which could add another twist to this plot. Next question. Which issues should define the election campaign? Issues such as same-sex marriage, legalization of medical marijuana, divorce, and other markers of progressive ideas were asked of the candidates. These issues also seem to be high on the bucket list of affluent millennial voters, but they don't seem to be as salient for ordinary Filipinos belonging to classes D and E, whose focus might be more on bread and butter issues, things such as jobs, wages, and cost of living. The opposition, which under the vice president tried to position itself as the voice of people on the fringes with its Ahon Laylayan coalition, gambled on a platform that sought to cobble together different marginal constituents that traditionally were reserved for the legal left. Now, this hasn't really, the opposition's platform hasn't really offered anything to the broad middle class, other than to appeal to their sense of decency in opposing a foul-mouthed Duterte. The opposition has basically ceded the middle class and reserved its campaign for the people on the margins. The administration, for its part, with its fresh credit upgrade on the back of its tax reforms, its ease of doing business legislation to reduce red tape, its infrastructure build program, its rice liberalization law, which reduces inflation, can now simply run on its record of increasing entitlements for free education and healthcare that it has already passed at this point, and providing jobs and lowering unemployment through sound economic management and fiscal responsibility. They have the field in terms of catering to the broad middle classes of society now that the opposition has sort of abandoned. But all of that may be good and well, the opposition might say. But what about the administration's war on drugs? The deaths related to it? Should we just give the administration a free pass on that? Sure, they might say. We're not offering anything to the middle class. But it's a moral question. So the framing of it is like, you must support Ocho Derecho if you are a morally upright person, a decent person. And what about the challenges in the West Philippine Sea? The encroachment of our neighbors in our exclusive economic zone, the loans that have been offered to the government, and the influx of Chinese nationals into the country, taking on jobs that could have gone to locals, some would say. Shouldn't we register our vigorous opposition to these developments? That's the question being posed by the opposition. Possibly we should look at this question and see whether the opposition themselves, how they have answered them. Is anyone proposing a solution that could fix these problems? Let's tackle them one by one, shall we? First of all, on the war on drugs. Something that we ought to be addressing is the victims of the war on drugs, right? Namely the children, the spouses who have lost their loved ones, their main breadwinners in this war. Whatever the number, what about the victims? We focus on those being executed and killed and jailed, but what about their families? And the drug dependents who have surrendered or still suffer mental illness and need treatment. What happens to them when they are released from prison? How do they reintegrate into society after they've served their sentences? Those for and against the war on drugs can't deny that these are valid challenges facing us today. But I haven't really seen a debate around what to do here. Neither side has put forth a policy for how to address these needs. They've just raised issues, but they haven't really offered solutions. Other than from Bato de la Rosa, who has pushed for more rehabilitation centers in the community to deal with drug addicts and has proposed to mandate the teaching of drug awareness to students in schools. Another proposal comes from Senator Nancy Binay, who proposes to have preventive drug programs in schools. Those are the only two candidates talking about how do we deal with this issue. What to do with the victims of drugs and the drug war has been drowned out by the noise of the campaign. So for the opposition, right, it represents a lost opportunity, in my view, to provide an alternative drug policy in contrast to Duterte's war on drugs, to deal with what they claim is an anti-poor drug campaign. If they had articulated such a policy, then they might have peeled away some support from the administration, from people who see drugs as a legitimate, real problem confronting our society today. But on the other hand, also have doubts as to the long-run efficacy of Duterte's style in pursuing his anti-drug campaign. This is the missed opportunity of the opposition. Where is their alternative drug policy? Where is their alternative strategy for dealing with the drug problem in our country? Instead of pushing for legalization, a controversial topic, as what the vice president has previously done, they could have distinguished themselves from the administration by showing how they would treat mental illness and provide restorative justice to the community for victims of EJKs. All this talk of human rights, right? But no concrete proposals on the table for how to bring about restorative justice and how to fix the judicial system so that EJKs don't have to be resorted to because of the corruption that exists in the judicial system. Instead, what do we have? Well, we have the Bikoy videos. So that is how this issue has been handled, right? It's not about the policy. It's not about the strategy. It's not about the alternative solutions. It's not about tackling the issue head on. No, it's about distracting the voters out there from the real issue, from the thing that affects people's lives, the things that matter to people, right? Whether which side of the issue you're on, whether you're for or against, whether you've been a victim or you've been the victimizer, there still remains the question of what to do with those victims. Have the opposition put forward a proposal on how to help them? No, that question remains unanswered. Secondly, on the West Philippine Sea, whether you are for constructive or antagonistic approaches to China, one problem remains, right? We don't really pose a credible deterrent to China with our feeble Navy and Coast Guard. All of our neighbors in the region, Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, all of them, bar none, have built up significant military assets in the form of submarines and shipping vessels to patrol their seas and protect their interests. Now that poses a credible deterrent. We don't have one, and this is why China is picking on us. The only way to enforce the UN arbitral ruling is with hard power, with de facto military occupation of certain features and reefs and patrolling of the waters that surround them through the hard power of the Navy and the Coast Guard. I haven't heard in this campaign any sound policy pronouncements from either side that would commit us to higher defense spending for Navy modernization or to strengthen our fortifications in some of these islands that we've claimed. Instead, I've seen people on jet skis waving flags in the South China Sea. Now, what sort of serious political party does that without the policy settings in their platform? What sort of serious political system focuses on the jet skis and not on the policies that will make a difference? Right? Hello? Come on. You're better than that. Right? It's not just about obstructing Duterte. The voters are wanting alternative solutions. Don't just raise your fist, wave your flag, put on your life vest, and go jet skiing around the South China Sea. What difference is that going to make? Give us a solution. If the crisis is really as problematic and as deep and as threatening to our national sovereignty, do something more significant. The Duterte administration, at least for its part, has significantly ramped up spending on defense compared to the administration of Aquino, which in its first year in office actually contracted defense spending. And I've got the numbers to prove it, right? Just email me and I can send you the charts. Now, this flow of funding to the defense sector can be increased or better directed, like to the Navy and Coast Guard, rather than riding jet skis. Are we just going to wait for America or Australia to donate, or Japan for that matter, to donate shipping vessels to us? We've got to stand on our own 2 feet. This is what an independent foreign policy looks like, right? You arm yourself. You protect yourself. Good fences make for good neighbors. The fence in this instance is the Navy and the Coast Guard. So build it up, strengthen it. How much are you willing to commit? 50 billion, 60 billion over the next 3 years? Put it on the table. Don't just wave your flag at me, wave the UN arbitral ruling which cannot be enforced by the UN. Propose something meaningful. Thirdly, on China's Belt and Road Initiative and the infiltration of our local job market, I haven't really seen any concrete proposals for how we can improve the jobs and skills matching of our education and training sector to ensure that locals have every chance to gain employment from these projects. How do we develop master plumbers, master carpenters, master builders, and the like from scratch? How do other countries do it? They do it through apprenticeships and traineeships, which are funded through the equivalent of their TESDA to benefit both the employer and the apprentice. Wage subsidies to the employer, free training or heavily subsidized training to the apprentice. The apprentice earns a wage while working and learning on the job, and the employer gets a subsidy to help defray the cost of training people on the job. And you do that over 2 to 3 years, and at the end of it, you'll have a person with the necessary skills, with a highly skilled worker in that occupation. That's how you do it, right? Otherwise, you have to import the labor. You have to import the laborer from somewhere else. Now, no one has really tried addressing this issue of skills shortage other than Bam Aquino, who has pledged to open more trabajo centers, which really can only help refer people to jobs, people who already have the training and the skills. It doesn't really provide employers the opportunity to offer subsidized places for apprentices and trainees to work for them while receiving accredited on-the-job training towards an industry-recognized occupational qualification. Now, I also think that this issue has been drowned out by those who, in any Western nation, right, would have been called out for their xenophobic, racist epithets. I've seen stuff on Twitter, I won't repeat here, calling Chinese people derogatorily, which in any advanced country, in any Western nation, if you had done that, you would have been called out as being xenophobic, right-wing racists. But in this country, somehow, they're the progressive people. Go figure. In our country, it's actually hip or progressive. It's actually woke to call out these, to say that, we're being invaded by an army of Chinese workers, right? Anywhere else, you'd be labeled a Brexiteer, a Trumpian. But in this country, wow, they're the progressives. Whew. What we should be guaranteeing is a better monitoring and tightening of the process for approving foreign worker visas. And I think the administration is already onto that, right? With Secretary Bello, Labor Secretary Bello, starting to get onto that. But again, I haven't really heard any concrete proposals from the noisy people who are making this an issue on how we might do this properly, screening foreign workers and monitoring the numbers. I haven't heard any proposal from any candidate or any political party during this campaign. Maybe they're out there, right? But they just haven't, been given the airtime, right? Now, come on, guys. We need to lift our game. The final week is usually about closing the deal with constituents and preparing the ground game and getting your logistics in place for the election. Last-minute revelations are designed to cause a stir, to try and swing voters one way or another. If I were a swing voters, I would just tune out all the political noise right now. Focus on the policy positions of the candidates, on their achievements, on their capabilities. Forget all this noise. Don't let it sway you, because that's what it's designed to do. Policy discussions tend to be thrown out of the window on the last week of the campaign with all of these distractions. Just as voters start tuning in, all this rubbish gets spat out. I wouldn't pay any attention to it if I were you. So as we reflect on the campaign season, all that's transpired, many questions have been asked, but the crucial ones, I fear, still haven't been answered. This has been another edition of The Cusp. I'm Doy Santos. Thank you for listening.